Hello everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of our 2-part episode. In this episode of the Council of Elrond, we're going to continue discussing everyone's favourite 54,000-year-old mischievous master of deceit and all-round naughty boy, Sauron. I'm here as always with my co-host Dave, and without further ado, let's continue this conversation on the Dark Lord of Middle-earth.
What orders from Mordor, my lord? What does the Eye command?
Before we start today's episode, I'd like to give a huge thank you to all the people who have been so generous over the last couple of weeks and donated the price of a cup of coffee, or in some cases more than that, to Dave and myself. We set up a Buy Me a Coffee account so that people could give a small donation if they felt so inclined to help sponsor the podcast, and we've been really surprised by the absolute soundness of some of our listeners. So really a huge thank you to each of you. Your donation helps massively, and we really can't believe that people will actually treat us to a coffee or a pint in return for hearing us ramble on about Lord of the Rings. Normally people are paying us to shut up about it, so this makes for a nice change. If you would like to help us out too and make a small donation, you can find us on buymeacoffee.com/the Mellon Heads, or look for the link in the podcast info section. And now, let's get into today's episode. Alright, I want to kick off part 2 of this episode by asking you a quick question, Dave. If the ring had remained lost, would Sauron have won?
Well, in the movies and the books, they talk about how Sauron wants the ring. He wants the ring to regain his full form, and he's searching for it the whole time. But I definitely think that he's working on taking over Middle-earth anyways. Well, I think the ring being missing is he kind of uses that to his advantage in a way. There's no way to stop him, but there is a way for him to get more powerful by, bending the will of Saruman and creating a huge army, and he still plans to take over Middle-earth. So, I don't know, that's a really good question, because I suppose it's probably not the way he would have wanted things to go, but he could still make do. He could take over Middle-earth.
Yeah, so basically, the main question is that if Frodo didn't discover that was the ring, or if Gandalf hadn't told him, by the way, this is the Ring of Power, and if all this, it seems like this big terrible task, like, oh my God, you need to go, because you've found this ring, now we need to go and destroy it, and that seems like it's terrible. But if they didn't have that option to go and destroy the ring, what was their other choice? How would they have avoided defeat?
Yeah, because Frodo goes, why don't we hide it? Tell no one about it. No one knows it's here, do they, Gandalf? But obviously the Nine are always hunting for the ring, and that's probably just too great a risk.
Well, the main reason for that was that nobody knew it was there except for Gollum, and he actually had been captured and tortured.
Yeah,
by
but
Sauron, he gave up the names Shire and Baggins. So
but that's you could easily get around that. You could send it to your neighbors, send it somewhere else. I don't know,
and kill yourself.
Yeah.
Well, the answer that I would say is that Sauron would have won, undoubtedly, if the ring had not been found. That Sauron's forces greatly outnumbered the Free Peoples by that point, and Rohan mustered a force of 6,000, and Gondor hadn't even raised his armies properly when Sauron's invasion began. And even if the One Ring hadn't been found and was still in the river, Sauron would have eventually won. So Gandalf and the White Council were basically going for an all or nothing plan. Get to Mordor, destroy the ring, and we win. Or fail, and we definitely lose. Sauron just wanted the One Ring back, as it made him even more powerful, and he was tied to it, and also it was his one fatal vulnerability. So he wanted to remove that, and he wanted to, just be all powerful, and also he would have had more control over other areas and other aspects if he had his ring. So he basically was at a power level 7, and he wanted to get to power level 10, but he was already more powerful than anybody else, and he already had a better army. He had huge control over massive parts of the earth. So he definitely would have won.
Yeah, and I think maybe Gandalf and some of his friends like Elrond and such, we know that the elves kind of abandoned faith fairly quickly, and they all decided to leave Middle Earth and all that. But I think for the likes of Gandalf and Elrond, the best analogy would be kind of like global warming. They knew that eventually it was going to take over and destroy the Earth. They knew that Sauron was probably eventually going to win, but the fact that that the ring has turned up, they're like, oh, this is a get out of jail free card. So like, it's maybe like, for us, it would be like resetting the Earth somehow. I don't know. Greta Thunberg has discovered some sort of cure. So it seemed like, yeah, like what you said, Sauron was definitely going to be able to take over. His forces were far too many, and some people that weren't, like the Haradrim and the Easterlings, they had kind of joined Sauron's forces as well. So it wasn't just orcs and Uruk-hai and Sauron and Saruman's army. He was actually like taking over other people. So he definitely would have won eventually.
Yeah, it was just a matter of time. It was just a matter of time. Like the amount of people that he had under his control at that time, as you mentioned, the Haradrim and the Easterlings and people like that, they were all like evil men that he had poisoned over like millennia, and basically they were completely under his control. The same way that Saruman poisoned the men in the mountains and whatever, and they came down and they were like killing people from the Westfold and all that.
Men of Dunland.
Exactly.
The horsemen took your land. They drove your people into the hills to scratch a living off rocks. Take back the lands they stole from you. Burn every village.
That was like a big get for Sauron, wasn't it? When Saruman joined him, it was kind of like, I don't know. It's like the turn states in America, or what are they called?
Swing states. Yeah.
The swing states, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
It's like getting Saruman is like, oh, nice one. We got, I don't know, Georgia or one of those swing states.
We know states.
Yeah, we don't know anything.
Yeah, so basically, he got Sauron he got Saruman in his pocket, and he was like, "Nice one, got this lad here. Now he's going to be doing loads of work for me." And he thinks it's going to come back to him, but it's not.
You fool.
Anyway, next question is one that I see a lot online, and I see people saying like, "Oh, I've got a plot hole," and that's, why doesn't Sauron become invisible when he puts the ring on, or when he wears the ring? Why doesn't he go invisible if everybody else that puts on the ring turns invisible?
Yeah, like, you know, I've definitely thought about that before, but I just kind of thought it was a silly thing. Like, it definitely affects other people differently to how, you know, like Frodo puts on the ring, he turns invisible. Tom Bombadil puts on the ring, he doesn't turn invisible. We don't have an answer for that, but I just assume, you know, depending on the race you are, the level, the hierarchy, or the position you are on the hierarchy, it can affect you in different ways. And I think someone like Frodo, if he puts on the ring, he turns invisible, and he's got no say or no power or no effect on what he can do on the ring. But when Sauron puts on the ring, it's a completely different kettle of fish. He's able to do many things, and he just probably chooses not to be invisible, or the ring just doesn't have that effect on him because it has different effects, I suppose. Yeah, well, you are correct that the ring affects different people differently, and Sauron knows how to use the ring, and Gandalf says it in the movies that he's the only one that can bend it to his will. So the ring doesn't actually make you invisible. There are two realms. There is the material realm and there's the spirit realm, or you could call it the Wraith realm in Tolkien's Legendarium. Okay, right, yeah. And so wearing the ring partially sends one from the physical realm to the Wraith realm, and hence the person seems to have disappeared in the physical realm. Now, I said partially, and that doesn't mean that the person should be partially invisible, but only that the existence of the person is not wiped out from the physical realm, because we saw in The Hobbit sometimes Bilbo, when he's wearing the ring, he actually casts a faint shadow in the sunlight. So he's not completely gone. I don't remember that. I don't know if it's in the movie now or I'm just talking about the book. Sorry. I'm not sure if that's in the movie. I can't remember. But in the movie, when Frodo puts on the ring, he sees the faces of the Black Riders
And
Yeah.
he sees that these are kings of men from olden days. So this shows that these men exist in the spirit world. And we can also see them in the material world too, thanks to the special cloaks that Sauron gave them. Now, the Ring of Power corrupts people, and those who use them for long may completely shift into the Wraith realm. And this is what happened to the 9 Black Riders, the Ring Wraiths. So also remember, like, Gollum doesn't actually wear the ring, he just hoards it. And this might be why he didn't turn into a Wraith. Basically, Sauron already exists in both the physical realm and the Wraith realm, or the spirit realm. So he already exists in both realms. So when he puts on the ring, he doesn't need his body to be transferred to the other realm because he's already there. And so that's the reason it is. However, the men and the elves and the hobbits, they only exist in the material realm. And so if they put the ring on, they get transferred into the other realm.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, because I knew that, but I was thinking for a second.
I knew that.
No, like, I obviously knew that the ring transports you to like the Wraith world, but I was thinking there for a second, like, wait, why the hell does the ring make you go invisible again? Why does it do that thing? But yeah, I kind of had a brain fart there for a moment.
No, well, it's an interesting question that I've seen it a few times. So it's
I have wondered that before as well, with the likes of Frodo and, well, mainly Gollum. Like, why you would think if you love something so much like a ring, I'd understand if it was like coins or something, but if you loved a ring, why doesn't he wear it more often? And
same with Bilbo, really. The Bilbo just kept it in his pocket.
But like, for the likes of Bilbo, like, he knows it turns you invisible. So I suppose he probably wanted to be visible a lot of the time.
It would have been really
for the likes of Gollum, who's just like in the caves and doing nothing.
Well, maybe he didn't like the experience of wearing the ring because you get transported into the Wraith realm and you can't really see stuff very clearly. You can't hunt fish. Everything's a bit blurry, so you could live in a blurry world.
Yeah, maybe holding onto the ring and keeping it in your pocket is like going out for a few pints, but putting it on is like the awful hangover the next day, and you're like, oh, I don't like that part. I'll just stick to the drinking.
Putting it on is the one that tips you over the edge.
Yeah.
Start falling.
It's those 2 shots of Jägermeister at 4 a.m.
Yeah, exactly.
And you're like, oh God.
Yeah, 4 more Jaeger bombs, please.
And no regurgitation.
It's a drinking.
Last one standing wins.
Right. Anyway, moving on. Quick question. Why did cutting Sauron's finger off defeat him, as we see in the prologue in the movie?
Is this a trick question? He has the ring on that finger, so they cut it off to get the ring.
So in the movie, we see Sauron reaching out for Isildur, and Isildur cuts off his finger.
And we know in the books that he was defeated, and then Isildur actually went over and cut the finger off him after the fact. But
exactly. So that's the first point. So you are correct. There's a little bit of a trick in there. So it's a bit of a movie myth that Sauron wasn't defeated just because they cut his hand off mid-battle. He was actually already defeated before that. So what happened was that he was defeated by the combination of Elendil, Isildur's father, and Gil-galad, who was the king of the elves. They came together. They both had super weapons, and they were superhumanly powerful.
Super duper!
And they both wrestled with Sauron to the death, and Sauron was mortally wounded while the others were killed. And I said earlier on in the podcast that at that point, he actually killed Gil-galad with his hands by burning him to death. So it's pretty nasty. But then Sauron was mortally wounded and he died as well. So Isildur simply cut the ring from Sauron's lifeless body. And then Sauron's spirit was released from his body since he needed the ring to retain his form in that state of injury. But my other question was, imagine they were in the middle of battle and suddenly one of them chopped off his hand and cut the ring off like we see in the movie. Would the result have been the same, do you think?
Well, just from what you've said there, it seems not, because it was the fact that he was mortally wounded and he was on death's door, and the ring was basically the only thing keeping his spirit inside that big metal body. So actually, I'm just thinking now, should they not have cut the ring off him at all and just brought the whole body up and dumped that into the volcano, and that would have killed him and destroyed the ring, whereas actually cutting the finger off him means that his spirit escaped in a way.
Well, yeah, but they still could have destroyed the ring in that moment. His body doesn't really mean anything. It's got no significance. That's just the form that he takes when he's on
it
Middle-earth.
stored his spirit, which
It did. Yes, it did.
yeah.
But
so like if you had a mortally or a really badly wounded Sauron, do you know what I'm getting at? You had a wounded Sauron, which meant his spirit couldn't go anywhere else, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. They could have taken him up and thrown him and the ring in, or they could have just taken the ring and thrown it in, but they didn't do either. So it would have been a good idea. But also, you need to know as well back in the day that when like Sauron killed Elendil, Isildur's father, and when Isildur took the ring, it wasn't just because he was greedy. He took that as payment for his father's death. And we see that happen in other parts way back in the history in the Silmarillion where basically someone else is killed and their son goes off in search of the Silmarils to claim them back against Morgoth. And that was totally for payment of his father's death. And it's kind of this sort of thing. So that's kind of what Isildur was going for. He was just kind of like, this is like, my father won't have died for nothing. This will pay for his life, basically.
This will be a family heirloom now.
Exactly. But anyway, to answer the question, yes, you're pretty much right. Like if they cut off his finger in the middle of battle, it wouldn't really have had too much effect because they could have taken the ring and put it on, but Isildur never learned to use the ring, even after years of trying. And so if anyone cut the ring off Sauron's finger while he was still fresh and strong, he would have just taken it back and put it on a different finger. So he would have been fine. It wasn't like we saw in the movie where losing the ring from his finger, it immediately caused his body to just like explode and the whole place to erupt. But so yeah, not exactly the same.
No, but it was. We've talked about it before how the movie kind of took shortcuts, not in a negative way, but took shortcuts, and we kind of discussed the fact that maybe the whole prologue and everything being narrated by Galadriel or Cate Blanchett is kind of like almost legendarium of Middle Earth and the lore. Like it's maybe that's not exactly how it happened, but that's kind of how the story was told. And, and yeah, that might not be technically canon. It's just it's kind of like reading the Game of Thrones books. They're all from someone's point of view, and this is how Galadriel was telling us, the viewer, the story.
Yeah, no, that's exactly true. And again, that's kind of something that we kind of just sort of said in this podcast. We've no idea if that's kind of true or not, but I think it's a cool idea as well that maybe Galadriel's point of view, and when she's telling us what happened in the prologue, maybe she's just kind of embellishing the story herself because she's trying to make it sound a bit better. And she's like, you should never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Yeah, exactly.
But the power of the ring could not be undone.
Let's look at some of Sauron's powers. So we know that he's the most powerful being on Middle-earth, but we don't really know a lot about what he can do. So I'm just going to go through some of these things. I'll try and go through them quickly enough. So the first one is about shape-shifting. Now, I told you already at the beginning of the podcast that Sauron had the ability to take on different forms, such as when he transformed into an elf called Anatar. So, like all Maiar, Sauron initially is able to change shapes as he wishes, or he can go without any visible shape at all if he wants to, because we also know that Gandalf, before he came to Middle-earth, before he was Gandalf, he came to Middle-earth a few times before and kind of floated around as a spirit. Which we've may have discussed that before in a different podcast. I can't remember. But anyway, here are some of the shapes that Sauron took when he transformed. So he took on the shape of a werewolf one time, the mightiest werewolf ever to be on Middle-earth at the time. When he fought against this giant hound, which was the hound that belonged to Luthien. And in the same fight against the hound, he transformed into a huge snake, and he transformed into a man-sized vampire bat. and he ended up
My
flying away and escaping as a bat during that fight.
Well, she turned me into a newt. A newt. I got better.
He obviously has a lot of skills to be able to just transform into werewolves and snakes and bats and these types of things. And as we also said before, he transformed into that fair elf known as Anatar, and he used that form to deceive all of the elves and men. Then finally, we know that he transformed into a dark form, which was, quote, an image of malice and hatred made visible, which he turned into after he got killed and after he lost his fair form.
So, like, does that kind of suggest that in the battle at what is it?
The Last Alliance.
The Battle of the Last Alliance, would that suggest that he was actually in the shape of Anatar?
No, that was long before. When he was Anatar, he got destroyed in the Second Age, and the Battle of the Alliance was at the very end of the Second Age, but this was still thousands of years before, and he got killed by Eru Ilúvatar. He got drowned at sea.
Right, okay.
This was when, again, it's kind of a long story. I don't want to go into it too much, but there's an island called Numenor where Sauron was waging war against the cities of Numenor until he eventually was defeated by the powerful Númenóreans. And Sauron was realizing that he couldn't defeat the Númenóreans militarily, but he thought he could manipulate them from the inside. So he allowed himself to be captured and begged falsely for mercy. Then the Númenóreans brought him back to Numenor as a prisoner. And Sauron, within 3 years, rose from being a prisoner to being the king's advisor. So, as I said, he was so good at manipulation and so good at basically deceiving people that he just kind of always was full of lies, and he just kind of rose up to the ranks promising things that were not real, etc. And he became the advisor for the king, and then eventually he convinced the king to hate the elves and to hate the Valar, and finally convincing them to worship Morgoth. And they quickly became corrupted. And in the end, the king of Numenor started an invasion of Valinor, which is where the Valar live. They live in Valinor, which is out west, out there in the Undying Lands. So he convinced the Númenóreans to go and try and fight all the Valar, which are these archangels, incredibly powerful spirits, which was a just completely insane idea. But they went for it because he was so convincing. And so they tried to take on all the Valar, and basically Manwë, who was the leader of the Valar, called on the god of Middle-earth. He called on Ilúvatar. And this is the only time that Ilúvatar shows up and gets involved with the goings-on of Middle-earth. And he came along and he sank Numenor. He sank the island below the waves. And he also changed the shape of the world. He changed the world from flat to round. He kind of broke the world and he turned it around. So that's the only... We spoke about that very briefly before in a podcast as well, where Ilúvatar got involved and he did that. So it was pretty cool, though. That's and that's when Sauron...
That's something that might come up in the series as well, right? I've heard
possibly.
Some people talking about maybe the sinking of Numenor might be a thing.
Yeah, I believe Numenor was probably going to show up. It was like an incredible city back in the day, and the people in Numenor, the Númenóreans, were like famously amazing fighters. But so that's how his character, his elven form, died. And after that, after Ilúvatar had killed him and drowned him at sea, he could no longer come back and take on fair forms. He lost that ability. And from then on, he had to live in the dark form, which was his image of malice.
The Metal Man.
Do you know the Metal Man?
The Metal Man?
The Muffin Man?
The Muffin Man!
Actually, speaking quickly of his armor, this is something I read the other day, that that's nothing... We don't know anything about his armor in the books. That's completely, again, that form is created by Peter Jackson. And if you look at the armor, it's actually really, really incredibly detailed. And I think Peter Jackson, what he was going for was having he wanted that armor to kind of be this sort of flamboyant kind of display of his incredible craftsmanship. Because again, Sauron was an incredible smith, and he was incredibly gifted with his hands. He had amazing gifts of creating these rings, and people spoke about how he was second to only maybe one other person in the history of Middle-earth in terms of his ability for creating beautiful pieces of jewelry like these rings or armor and things like that. So that's kind of a little thing that Peter Jackson added in as well.
Cool, yeah.
Other powers that he had. So we said shape-shifting. He could manipulate the nature of different things. For example, fire. He could manipulate fire. He used the mountain of fire, of course, to create his ring. And he was able to control the volcano, where in one quote it says, "Now Sauron prepared war against the Eldar and the men of Westernese, and the fires of the mountain were wakened again." So he could kind of like wake up the fires in the mountain whenever he wanted. And also we know that Sauron's skin was burning hot, and he actually killed Gil-galad, who was the king of the elves. He killed him by basically burning him to death with his hands.
Oh my god.
And so that's pretty badass.
That is nasty.
He could control the darkness, as we saw in the movie. He sends out like a dark cloud ahead of his army so that they can march by day.
Exactly, to cover the sunlight, basically.
Cover the sunlight, because the orcs hate sunlight. Yes, so he was able
And
to...
the trolls.
Most of them, basically, they all kind of hate it. He actually kind of also is able to upgrade these people. He can like upgrade the trolls and the orcs, and he can he has good powers of like skills of breeding and things like that as well. So it's another skill.
He's unlocked their higher skill levels.
Exactly, yeah. He's got 10 EXP points.
Skills of breeding.
He has
acquired those skills
from many years of experience. He could control storms. So on Caradhras, on the Red Horn, when they're climbing there, they don't really know if that's the mountain or if that's actually, they say, the enemy. So a quote from Boromir, he says, "They say in my land that he can cover the storms in the mountains of shadow that stand upon the borders of Mordor. He has strange powers and many allies." "His arm has grown long indeed," said Gimli, "if he can draw snow down from the north to trouble us here, 300 leagues away." And then Gandalf says, "His arm has grown long indeed." So in the movie, they kind of say that about Sauron, but in fact, in the books, they don't know if it's the mountain itself that's evil or if it's actually Sauron, who's 300 leagues away controlling this weather.
But also, were you saying that kind of he controls mountains in a way? Because that wouldn't surprise me at all, especially with the formation around Mordor.
He can control earth as well. That's another thing. So basically he can control fire. He can control darkness. He can control storms. He can control water as well. And there is an account of Sauron's arrival in Numenor that shows how Sauron could control water. And it says this: "Suddenly the sea became unquiet. It rose until it became like a mountain, and it rolled upon the land. The ships were lifted and cast far inland and lay in the fields. Upon that ship, which was cast highest and stood dry upon a hill, there was a man, or one in man's shape, but greater than any, even of the race of Numenor, in stature. He stood upon the rock and said, 'This is done as a sign of power, for I am Sauron, the mighty, servant of the strong.'" So he could just lift the sea and like basically fly it on the sea on the boat. So yeah, he's just complete badass. You spoke about controlling the mountains, and yes, he can control the earth as well. At the Council of Elrond, Galdor discusses the possibility of Tom Bombadil defying Sauron, but says that he does not have the power and that his power would have to come from the earth itself. Tom Bombadil's, that is. And then he adds, "And Sauron can torture and destroy the very hills." So Sauron can actually torture the earth. So he's it's pretty badass. Another one as well is called, well, it would be called a dark presence, where it seems that especially in the later days, Sauron's mere presence had a negative effect on everything and everyone around him. When he fled to Mirkwood after being defeated in the War of the Alliance, his arrival there caused the darkening of the whole forest. There was barely any light, the air was still and dark, and even some of the streams there had black water and were dangerous to drink from. And the whole forest was infested with giant spiders and other dark creatures. So his just presence just brings all of this darkness and this horribleness. So that's that's the power. It's just his horrible nature that just attracts this dark presence.
Yeah, and just the fact that you were saying how like he can control all these things, like he can literally control the earth and he can control everything. That's probably another reason why they have that phrase in the books of the Eye of Sauron. It's kind of like, you know, keep this away from the Eye of Sauron, or the Eye of Sauron is on you, but because like he can control everything. It's not like a physical eye on Barad Dur. It's actually like everywhere around you. He's watching you, and he can control most elements that you are using or touching or you're near. So it's just another thing that kind of popped into my head there.
No, definitely. And we spoke about his eyes before, and we've spoken about how they were really that was probably the part of his body that was most described by Tolkien, his eyes, and so that's why we get a lot of importance on his eyes. But he also had the power of farsightedness, where basically we know that Tolkien never meant for us to think of Sauron as a big flaming eye. However, his eyes play an important part of his description. They're said to be fiery, and they're said to never sleep. And there's a quote that says, "No living creature could pass through that veil that Sauron did not espy from the tower where he sat." So he was like a hawk, basically. He just could see everything that was going on.
I see.
Other powers, telepathy, which is pretty basic for Maya spirits. They can just chat away to each other without actually speaking.
Like Galadriel.
Although she's not a Maya, but she's still extremely powerful. She can use telepathy as well. Spells and words of command and songs of power, where it seems like spells and words of command and songs of power are generally something connected to magic in Middle-earth, and they can have all sorts of functions. We get an example when Gandalf tries to seal the door of the chamber of Marzabul in Moria with a spell, and the Balrog counters it. And both of them are Maiar. So Sauron would definitely be able to do things like this as well. So we don't really get that in the movie, but in the book, the Balrog's kind of chasing Gandalf, and Gandalf tries to lock a door, and he casts a spell on the door, and then the Balrog counteracts that spell, and Gandalf, and that weakens Gandalf, and he gets seriously hurt in that moment. But so Maya have this kind of power as well. Craftsmanship, as I spoke about that before, Sauron originally was a Maya of Aule, who was a smith and a master of all crafts, and Sauron remained mighty in the lore of that people. Using the ring, he also created Barad Dur, and it took 600 years to complete this fortress. So again, that's pretty good craftsmanship in that tower.
And he built it all himself. Started from scratch.
With his own two hands. Other ones, I'm going to go through these quickly. Necromancy, which we won't go into too much. Phantoms and illusions. He could create phantoms and illusions.
Necrophilia.
I wouldn't put it past him. Deceit and manipulation, which we've already spoken about a couple of times. He could charm the pants off anyone, that silver-toothed fox. And torture. He was pretty good at torturing people as well. So Sauron is able to torture people without even touching them directly, as happened during Sauron's interrogation of Pippin in the Palantir, where Pippin says, "I did not answer." He said, "Who are you?" I still did not answer, but it hurt me horribly. And he pressed me, so I said, "A hobbit." Then suddenly he seemed to see me, and he laughed at me. It was cruel. It was like being stabbed with knives. So that's pretty cool. Just kind of laughing, and then suddenly your victim feeling like they're being stabbed by knives. So, And then the final one on my list was the corruption and breeding, which I said a minute ago as well, that he created and bred orcs, and he also improved the trolls. He taught them the black language, and he made them more resistant to the sun. He also bred the fell beasts, and he bred werewolves, which were actually... He had a big gang. There was a big gang of werewolves on Middle-earth for a while back in the day as well. So
back in the day.
So yeah, that's a lot of his powers. So there you go.
Genie. He's a powerful boy.
Riddles in the dark. My precious.
So this is a section in the podcast called Riddles in the Dark. In this section, I, Johnny, bring a question to Dave, who is completely in the dark and has never heard this question before. And we need to basically see how he does, if he gets the answer right. And of course, you, the listener at home, can try and challenge yourself and see if you can maybe pause the podcast and guess the answer yourself, or guess along with Dave.
Yeah, good luck. Most of this podcast has been a riddles in the dark for me. I've been in the dark the entire time.
You've been in the dark for the last ages.
I'm like in Mirkwood, out in the forest, not knowing what's going on. Sipping on my black water here.
This is me when I'm trying to chat up a girl in a bar. Did you know what Morgoth did? And she's like, what? Yeah, gets him every time. So, my riddle for you, Dave, is what exactly happened in Mordor when the ring was destroyed? How did that cause the Tower of Barad Dur to collapse?
So, in this question, are you also saying that the tower did collapse when the ring was destroyed?
It did.
Okay. So how? Okay, I'm going to say that. What? Oh! I think I might have a good answer here.
Oh, that'll be a first.
That's true. So whatever powers he used to create the ring, which was like, jewelry making and all that kind of whatever that was, yeah.
Arts and crafts, yeah,
all that knowledge he learned. He used the same power and like abilities to create the Tower of Barad Dur and other elements in Mordor. So like, also I don't know, is that just in the movie where the lands like collapsed and everything? But if that also happened in the real Lord of the Rings canon, that would have been because he built the lands and the like fortresses of mountains around as well, and basically they all just like collapsed because for that one reason.
Very good, Dave. Very good. I'm impressed.
That was kind of a long-winded answer, but yeah. So to sum up,
no, but you were working it out as you were going.
Yeah. I was.
Oh my God, you were.
Yeah. So to sum it up, the power he used to make the ring was the same power he used to create the lands of Mordor and the Tower of Barad Dur and all that kind of stuff. So when one was destroyed, it took down the rest with him. Well,
yes, you're so close to the answer. Basically, it's not that the power that he used to make the ring was the same power that he used to make this. It's that he made the ring. Exactly.
The power of the ring.
He used the ring. He used the ring to make these things. So he created the ring of power, and it was extremely powerful. We don't really know a lot of what it did, but he was able to use the power of the ring to build some of these things, and like to change the formation of the earth and to build the towers itself. So what we see in Peter Jackson's version is not exactly what happened in the books, but there are some similarities. Like the tower did collapse and the earth shook from earthquakes. Sauron faded into a large shadow and disappeared. However, the ground did not swallow up all the evil creatures as we see in the movie, and this was just some added drama by Peter Jackson.
Yeah, it's cool though.
In fact, the battle continued after Sauron had been defeated, which is kind of an interesting fact as well. So most of the armies of Sauron fled, but some that hated men and elves stayed and continued fighting basically until the end, or until they were killed. But Sauron had huge, vast armies from people all over the world who kind of, they kind of hated each other as well, but they were all united under Sauron. So once he was no more, they had no reason to continue fighting together, and they all realized, I don't like those guys. It's kind of like in Game of Thrones as well, the King Beyond the Wall, how he united giants and all these different tribes. They all had huge, long histories of hating each other, but that one King Beyond the Wall, he united them all. That's kind of what Sauron did with all these loads of different tribes, the Easterlings, the Haradrim, all the people from Rhûn, all these people, he united them. And then after he was dead, or after he was diminished, they were like, well, I'm getting out of here. I don't want to stay and fight for some of that's not around anymore. But so that's one change from the books. And again, whenever I watch the movies and I see all the earth collapsing and just not collapsing around the good people. I always thought it was kind of like, oh, these people are good natured and they have good spirits and they have good hearts, and so some whatever power it is that's destroying all of this, like destroying the tower and destroying the earth, that just knows, okay, these orcs are evil. And so it was really weird. I couldn't really get my head around it, but I kind of
is that what you think? I always,
what did you think?
I always thought it was kind of sheer luck
Did
that
you?
they happened to be, well, it's because the Black Gate and all the actual mountains kind of all collapse in this big earthquake, and they're fighting in front of the Black Gate, and it's not every single orc is killed. I think
No,
most
but
of them,
just the way that it all collapses right up until just in front of the line of where the people like the good guys are standing, and it's like it's right there, and it kind of curves. They're like standing in sort of a circular shape as well. And
yeah,
like,
and it does curve
curves
around. I always
and
just
stuff.
kind of thought it was well, it's movie magic as well.
Extremely lucky, yeah.
But
yeah.
like, I think it is, well, what I thought it was kind of like lucky that, you know, they're not, if I kind of felt like if they were fighting inside Mordor, inside the Black Gates, like they would have gone down, but they just happened to be kind of outside it, and
Yeah.
it worked out well for them.
So it's, yeah, exactly. Like I never really understood it, and I kind of just thought, look, magic is involved, the earth is falling apart, and it doesn't really make sense. So maybe it's because these people who are followers of Sauron, the earth just crumbled from underneath them. That's what I always kind of thought. But then when I read the books, and it kind of says that doesn't happen. The earth does not fall apart. However, everything that Sauron created using the power of the ring did fall apart and did collapse. So Barad Dur, for example, the gigantic tower, measured about 1.5 kilometers in height. And that's taller than any building on Earth today. And it took 600 years to build, and Sauron used the power from the One Ring to complete it. But actually, that tower was destroyed after Sauron was defeated by the last alliance, so Isildur and all those guys. They destroyed the tower. However, they couldn't destroy the foundations because the One Ring had not been destroyed. And at the council, Elrond says, "The Dark Tower was broken, but its foundations were not removed, and while it remains, they will endure." They just couldn't destroy the foundations because they needed to destroy the ring in order to remove them completely.
Yeah.
So after this, Sauron managed to rebuild the tower quite quickly, and he did so in about 70 or 80 years, I think, and again using the power from the ring. And he also used the ring in developing some of the land and the mountains around Mordor and controlling the fires of Mount Doom. So once the ring was destroyed, everything that was made with its power was unmade. And so that's kind of what happened there, yeah.
Yeah, cool.
So well done, you got that pretty much bang on. So
Yeah,
good job.
no, I never really thought about it, but once you asked the question, that seems like the logical answer. And I'm a logical man.
I'm just a genius, you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good work, good job.
Thank you.
Did you learn a lot today about Sauron?
I did. I learned an awful lot. And I hope everyone else did too.
Can you tell me everything? Can you recite it all back to me now?
Yeah, so basically...
Yeah, so quite a information overload today on Sauron, but yeah, really, really interesting character. This was really me scratching the surface of Sauron's character as well. There's so much that I didn't go into detail on. So we could come back and revisit this character at another point.
This has got me excited for the TV show, the upcoming TV show, because
Yeah, I can't
think
wait.
a lot of the stuff that we talked about today, or a lot of the stuff that I learned today, is going to be coming up in Amazon's Lord of the Rings TV show. So yeah, I'm very
Exciting.
excited.
Yeah. I'm really excited. And yeah, Sauron, probably one of the coolest evil characters. And as I said, when you see an evil character that's really well developed and that you kind of understand the steps that they take and you understand the reasons why they've gone down this road, like we saw with Walter White, like we saw with Anakin Skywalker, like we saw with who was the other person you mentioned? Thanos as well. Thanos, we don't see much development either, but we do understand his motivations. That always just makes for a better character, and it makes for a more compelling character. And
another is Killmonger from Black Panther. He's another like fan favorite, or people always seem to love those antagonists that have motivation or that show the audience why they do the things they do. A funny thing I heard about Thanos actually recently enough, his whole motivation is that there isn't enough resources and all that kind of jazz. And if he clicks his fingers, he like basically cuts the universe in half, and it's random, so anyone could go. But why didn't he just click his fingers to double the resources? Like, why didn't somebody tell him that? What a dumbass.
Or double the size of the universe.
Yeah,
like the size of all the planets. Yeah.
It's like, this is the only way.
Yeah, that's a good one, actually. I never thought about that one before. That's class. Right. Well, that is the end of our podcast for today. And I hope you all learned a lot. And I hope you all are as excited as Dave and I are for the upcoming Amazon Lord of the Rings series, where we'll definitely see Sauron. Hopefully we'll see a lot of this character development, and also maybe some of his involvement in the battles with Numenor and the sinking of the island of Numenor. So that should be really exciting.
And we'll definitely be talking about it in future podcasts.
Oh yeah, for sure.
For sure.
All right, that'll do.
Toodaloo.
Goodbye, dear Bubba. Until our next meeting.
Well, guys, that just about does it for another episode of the Council of Elrond. We really enjoyed going deep into this fan-favourite foe, and we hope you all had a laugh or two along the way, and maybe learned something interesting about the background and history of the Dark Lord of Middle-earth. Please get in touch and let us know if we missed out on anything that you would have included, or if you just want to say hi. We'd really love to hear from you on any of our social media, or if you'd like to buy us a coffee, you can do so from the links in the podcast info section. That's it for this week, guys. See you next time.